One. I'm here joined today by President of our Board of Supervisors, Lyndon Breed, with our Chief of Police, Bill Scott, with the Executive Director of the Interfaith Council, Michael Pappas. And I want to express to the public, and particularly to the residents of San Francisco, that we recently learned of the National Park Service, which is a federal agency, is about to or has issued a permit for what we call alt-right groups to come and have a rally on the shores of Crissy Field, which is on federal property. We've learned this and we have registered our opposition and concern to the National Park Service. San Francisco is a welcoming city. We embrace diversity. We embrace the people here and the multicultures and gender and orientation of all of our people. We do not invite hate speech or hatred to come into our city and to instigate not only hatred, but potential violence. And we have all been very cognizant, watched very carefully all of the things that are still fresh in the minds of people that have happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, in Berkeley, in Portland, and in Seattle. And in the context of these types of rallies throughout these cities, we've been very cognizant of the kinds of violence that will happen. And in an effort to protect our people from both hate speech that can result in violence and the actual violence that's been perpetrated by a number of groups, we have demanded that the National Park Service reevaluate their permit in this case and to at least consider input that would be representative of the kinds of conditions that should be placed on such a permit to allow for a level of safety so that freedom of speech can be had. But I don't want, and I want to be very clear about this, we are not welcoming this group into San Francisco to promote hate. And we think that the National Park Service, without adequate evaluation and conditions, would do just that and would then, I think, increase opportunities for violence in our city and on the shores of federal property. We have been in communications directly with Senator Dianne Feinstein, with Leader Pelosi, with Senator Harris, and we're all in agreement that this is not enough conditions and not enough collaboration has been had by this federal agency, and that we think that unless they are totally ignorant of the kinds of things that have happened recently across the country, and particularly in Charlottesville, then they're playing with fire. And in our case, in San Francisco, we believe that without these conditions, it'll be like yelling fire in a crowded theater, that people will be placed in danger. And we don't want that to happen in our city. I have issued a direct letter as of the last hour to the National Park Service. My staff can hand you a copy of that, but it adequately reflects our concern that this issuance of a permit was haste, was without regard to the conditions that will present a level of public safety that I think all of us need to have, especially in light of what had occurred in Charlottesville and all the other cities where such protests have occurred. With that, let me invite up here the President of our Board of Supervisors, Lyndon Breed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for being here today. To say that we are outraged is an understatement. The fact that the National Park Service under the Trump administration would issue a permit after all that we've seen around our country, after the violence under these groups, under these hate groups, which is what they are, no matter what the names are, whether it's the KKK, whether it's white nationalists, neo-Nazi, these groups promote racism, they promote hate, they promote violence, they promote all the things that we are against here in San Francisco. And so we will stand strong against the National Park Service, against the Trump administration, to stop these kinds of protests from not only happening in San Francisco, they shouldn't be happening anywhere in our country. So no, you are not welcomed in San Francisco. We will do everything we can to stop you from being in San Francisco. We don't want to see our city torn apart because of the hate and the violence that you continue to promote all over the country. In San Francisco, your leaders stand strong. We will do everything we can to stop this from happening. And I want to thank the mayor for leading the way. I want to thank Chief Scott for being here and being prepared to do what's necessary to protect the public. You are not welcomed here. Don't come to San Francisco, and we're going to do everything we can to stop you.
Michael Pappas is the director of the Interfaith Council, and he's been in dialogue with us, and we are working closely together so that we could be cognizant of all the groups in our city and our region working together with us to provide level of safety. Michael?
Later on today, the San Francisco Interfaith Council will be issuing a statement on behalf of a vast number and diverse cross-section of our city's faith leaders. We are very concerned that the billing of this event is dealing with prayer and freedom and peace. We believe that words are very powerful, and disguising hatred and division and violence with words that are sacred are really misguided, and we intend to use the power of the pulpit, our vast communications networks, and our relationships in this city to counter what it is that this group seeks to do. And we avail ourselves both to the mayor and to our police officers and to our city as the moral voice of San Francisco.
Chief Scott's here to answer questions you may have, and let's open it up for a few questions.
What conditions are you looking for? What would, you said if you're going to approve the permit, you should have conditions. What conditions are you looking for?
Certainly conditions, if first they know exactly what they're permitting and what groups are being then invited, and what are those associate groups that would end up showing up. What kind of access do they expect to have to go to Crissy Field? Because as we learned in Charlottesville, when people were getting back to their cars, there was a lot of instigation of violence on that way. So it's the routes, it's the groups, it's even the number of people, under what conditions, especially in light of the potential of violence. How can we have conditions that prevent that from happening?
Mayor Lee, do you know when NPS or the GGNRA approved this permit, and when did you, the city, get wind of the event? Because the timing is sort of pertinent.
Yes. Well, we learned that they might be doing it yesterday, and then, as of this morning, we've been in communications with them. I don't know for a fact whether it's been issued to the permit applicant yet or not, but we were told that they were going to issue it by the National Park Service.
So do you know when the National Park Service agreed to this conditional permit? Was it the last couple of days? Or?
I think it's as fresh as this morning.
So after post-Charlottesville?
I think
Absolutely. This is post Charlottesville. Let me make it very clear. I also want to make it very clear, because the supervisor and I have had a lot of discussions about this. This is not a San Francisco permit. This is a federal permit under a federal agency under the federal administration. And we just don't like to see what's happening on this process to be reflective, because we wouldn't do such a careless thing like that in an automatic way like that, with lives at stake and with hatred at the front steps of this particular rally.
Yeah, I think you described an interesting threat letter. Can you say specifically what it threatens? Is there litigation being contemplated to try to stop this rally from happening?
If everybody heard that, I just want to repeat the question. What kind of demands do I have in the letter? Well, first of all, I want clarity. What is it that they're permitting? Under what conditions? I think we need to educate the National Park Service about what it is that they're potentially inviting here, because we kind of think in a logical way that you wouldn't do this in such a cavalier fashion if you knew what was going to happen. And then hopefully we'll get a response, and then we can react to that. Right now, we're initiating our initial things, and yes, when it comes to public safety, we as a city will do everything we can to make sure the level of safety is reflected in any permits or any activity that we have, especially since we know it's going to happen in potentially less than 2 weeks. We're going to do everything, and everything is on the table because safety ought to command everything that we have.
Mr. Mayor, what's the level of responsibility? They approved the permit before Charlottesville, and then it's a First Amendment issue. But that's the reason why they issued it.
I do not believe that the permit was issued before the activities in Charlottesville happened.
What about the issue of free speech? Because that's how the NPS issued the permit under the pretense of free speech.
I began by saying we are a city of tolerance. We do enjoy free speech. But I suggest to you, there is a difference between free speech and hate speech with the intent of causing violence. That must be distinguished in urban settings like San Francisco. There is clarity in my mind, in the supervisor's mind, in our administration, that people are coming here to commit violence, not to have an academic dialogue, not to have a fire chat on differences of opinion. They're coming here to promote violence. They're aiming their guns at our people, and we're going to stop them.
Should the president intervene since it's a federal permit?
Well, maybe we are asking whether or not he's already done so.
What type of response can we expect from SFPD should this demonstration happen, and what will that look like?
Well, our message is clear. Violence will not be tolerated in any form. As Mayor Lee said, we respect the First Amendment rights of anybody that wants to come and protest. They have that right under the Constitution, but we will not tolerate violence in our city. So that is our message, and that will be our stance, and that will be our objective.
Two questions for you, Chief Scott. The GGNR and NPS, they obviously have their own law enforcement. Have you already been able to discuss with them how SFPD will work with them to keep people safe? And then have you thought about any rules in terms of not allowing sticks or batons or other things that could be used as a weapon at Gracie's that day? Or have you discussed with them? I guess that'd be up to them.
Well, those discussions are happening, and in terms of what will be allowed, sticks and that and whatnot, look, a weapon is a weapon, and some things that if we see that are precursors to violence, we want to cut those things off. But let me emphasize and go back to what Supervisor Breed and Mayor Lee said. This permit is for federal property. So definitely we want to plan as best as we can do that. We want to be a collaborative agency, and we will always be that. But we want to protect the streets of our city to make sure that the residents of this city, the people that work and visit in this city, are safe in exercising their First Amendment rights, as well as doing what it is that they do daily. And that's where the violence and whatever we can do preemptively to prevent the violence, we will do that.
Federal land, are you guys able to deploy with or without park police with coordination on that property by the demonstrations on your own without coordination? Or is there a certain perimeter that you have to keep depending?
So we just have to be ready. I mean, you know, how we will do what we need to do, we're very early in this process. You know, if it does occur on the 26th, we just have to be ready. We will be adequately deployed. We have to be ready. We have to be willing, and we are, to coordinate with whatever agencies that we have to work with to make sure that our streets are safe.
Sir, that's not exactly what I asked. I asked, can you be on that federal property or not?
Well, if we're asked to be on a federal property in a mutual aid situation, in a reactive situation, we're going to do what we need to keep people safe. I mean, it's about safety. We're not going to draw a line and say this is federal, this is city. We want to ensure the safety of anybody that is involved in this process.
Chief, we've seen in other cities.
Last question. This is the last question.
We've seen in other cities that law enforcement, for whatever reason, aren't necessarily engaging when there are sort of these massive street brawls happening. There's sort of less opportunity because of officer safety concerns, as I understand. I wonder if you can talk about that tactic and whether San Francisco uses that tactic or whether you have something different in mind.
let me just say this. This city has a long history of handling protests, and I think we do a good job at it. We engage really well. We try to facilitate and make sure that people are safe. We won't tolerate violence. So if we see that occurring, we're going to put a stop to it. And there's a certain degree of engagement that you have to do that. There's a certain degree of communication that you have to do to have that occur. And those things will occur, particularly on the city streets. But again, this is on federal property, at least the permit is for that. And we want to make sure we do everything we can in the event that this does happen to be prepared, to be communicative, and to be collaborative in order to be safe.
I just want to say lastly that events of this, I mean, we are learning what is occurring all across the country. And this is why we're having this dialogue. For a federal agency, that's the National Park Service, to rely on a call for mutual aid in response to something that might happen, rather than place adequate conditions on a permit that they wish to issue, is, I think, a huge, huge mistake. And that's why I believe, and I think I have the backing of the president of the board and all the others, this must and should be reevaluated by the National Park Service, the whole thing. Thank you.